Brought to you by Exabeam, I'm Steve Moore, and this is the new CISO. Manu, thank you so much for being here. For the uninitiated, as I always say, who are you and what do you do?
My name is Manuel, Manu Ressel. I'm from Germany. I'm I would say, not really new, but since March, new CISO of the SAUTER Group, which is an international company for building automatization. I have a very, I would say, colorful background because I'm a former teacher and I was self-employed as a digital leader.
Yeah, your background is awesome. We had a kind of a prep call for those that aren't familiar. Obviously, we're doing video now, and before we record, we kind of have a bit of a chat, and we're doing an early morning, early for me, recording, and I got up even earlier to kind of clear my head and walk and do what I usually do. And I was excited explaining that this topic, I don't think we've ever encountered this before, and so his background is really quite interesting, and there's a lot of kind of twists and turns that our prep call had. So I'm super excited to have the chat with you today. I'm really glad you're here. And the first thing I'll lead with is your statement. The first thing he ever said to me was, we're getting ready to do a security leadership podcast. And your statement, if you remember, was, I never wanted to do security. And I find that ironic. So you kind of hinted at this. What was your first job?
Yeah, my first job was a teacher, and as I was a kid, I taught other pupils in languages, English and French and some stuff, and yeah, I think this is the job I wanted to do. This is the thing I studied, and I had a lot of fun doing it. But the German school system is a bit of a problem right now, and it's for those who's working in it, it's not really a good environment, and for pupils, it's a really bad environment because we're teaching skills out of the last 200 years around. Our system is 200 years old and has never changed. So it's I don't like to, I would say, make pupils doing things which they don't need in the future on and I don't want to do them old stuff. Yeah, my I would say my intention always was to bring new skills, future skills to pupils which they could need in their own future and which makes them to, I would say, the workers for tomorrow, but the German system isn't like that. Yeah.
So
I
what?
never wanted to have, sorry,
No,
interrupt,
yeah, go. Yeah, yeah.
a job where I have to sit 8 or 12 hours a day in front of a monitor. But yeah, I think I can do it. And yeah, so you have to do the best for your families and the best out of your skills.
Yeah, well, you certainly bring, and that's part of what I want to cover here. Look, one of the things we do is this is meant to be virtual mentorship. We cover a lot of different topics. The main focus is to speak to leaders in the security field, and the awesome part about it for me, the one of my favorite parts of this is that we all come from different backgrounds, and uh, I I really enjoyed your perspective on this. The fact that you were irritated with like this Prussian model of teaching and this kind of memorization and obedience model is what I would say it is. Maybe that's not fair, but um, in your sort of irritation with that. But before we go there, when did you always want to be a teacher? I mean, you could argue that a security leader is always a teacher as well too. But like, when did you decide you were going to be a teacher before?
Yeah, I think this was in the ninth or tenth grade where you have to choose to get to know different jobs in Germany. You have to make some practica, you would say here in Germany, and to visit different jobs. And I saw the jobs of my parents, and I always don't want to do them because my dad was a worker in a big factory My mom was in a office, finance office, and no, those weren't things. My grandfather was a woodworker, who made sculptures out of wood, and
Yeah.
no, I don't have. I have the problem with two left thumbs, you would say in Germany.
We, yeah. I've never heard that, but there's two left feet, as we would say, for like the dancing
Okay.
thing as well. Yeah, but yeah, it makes sense. Um, so this was something that you really wanted to do, and you talked about even trying to figure out new ways. You talked about visiting different cultures and different education systems and trying to implement this. And as you were talking about this, it reminds me sometimes of trying to change security culture as well, which sometimes doesn't work. You often hear CISOs talk about trying to change culture and thinking about security and cooperation, and sometimes it's hard and it fails. And so it automatically reminded me all of this. So I don't know, when maybe talk a little bit about the very last of your teaching, and then we can talk about the start of doing more technical work and your advisory work. So, what ultimately pushed you out of teaching before we talk about kind of your technical security career?
Yeah, what pushed me out was I was a principal or head teacher of I would say rather mid-school with around 400 pupils, and I was official, and my bosses wanted me to do something I couldn't, I would say. I doesn't want to do because they wanted me to close one of my locations, and they forced me to do it in my name.
Mm.
And I don't want the pupils to take a longer way to school, which means if I had closed this location, they had to take the bus around 30 minutes to school and back, and you know, pupils from the age of 6 to 9, they're having issues taking the bus.
Yeah, and it shows your heart by saying this, because it's in the US, it's very common to have a very long bus ride. I was in the country and had to go kind of into the city, and it was like a 45-minute bus ride one
Wow.
way for me and then back. So it's having that level of, kid doesn't want to be on, to your point, they should be able to be close to their school, which I think is your desire. But so you get you decide this is no more for you. The stress is too much. And I think this is an interesting point. What do you start doing then? You decide, I'm not going to be headmaster or principal anymore. What do you do for? I think it's kind of a creative way that you start making money to replace this career. Tell us what you do then.
Yeah, what I did was the thing what I did the years before. I always was one of the digital leaders here in our region, and I had a lot of schools which implemented with me Microsoft 365, for example, as base system for digital teaching lessons and some stuff. And now I, yeah, choose the way to be self-employed, to support other schools to doing their way, to support officials, towns, and companies to get on their, I would say, cloud journey. Um, I don't know if your listeners know this. Germany is, yeah, I think if you're looking at cloud usage in the companies in the mid-size, very, very back. Yeah, we don't have. Oh, we have a lot of mid companies not using any cloud technologies for the moment. Also, my company, where I'm, where I am at right at the moment, is not using a lot of cloud technologies. We are on the start of that.
Why? I mean, there's two reasons I could think of, maybe three, but my guess would be probably out of ignorance and not out of fact, because I haven't seen this specific to to Germany. I know that there's some very specific laws around workers' council and things that can sometimes slow the adoption of certain types of technologies and processes for certain size companies. But why do you think, why is Germany, in your opinion, slower to adopt these, to join this sort of transformation? Why are they lagging instead of leading?
Yeah, I think there are a few reasons. The Black Forest reason would be to say, yeah, we do it like we always did it. This
Mm,
is something you can find in the mid-range companies or in the small companies very often. You have, I would say, a lot of costs in the cloud transition, and as longer you're waiting, as higher the costs. I think you know this. And there's a lot of high pressure also in companies. Germany is, I think, one of the, yeah, Germany's biggest industry is the automobile industry, and this is a sector where you have really hard price fights in the supplier chains.
yeah,
And this also leads to not invest in future technologies. And another reason is also, yeah, we have some, I would say, issues also right at the moment with the US clouds, the Chinese clouds, the Russian clouds, and there's no real European alternative which
right.
you can use very easily. So the I would say politically disruption right now at the moment is also forcing me to think about cloud and cloud systems in another way because our customers are really they're looking what you're doing and some technologies which we could use a few years ago wouldn't be allowed right now.
Can can you give an example of that specifically? So technologies that would have probably been okay a couple years ago that today would not be.
The
I'm
use
not
of
sure I know.
M365, for example, in our critical infrastructures is something which is rather not good at the moment because there's a really trust issue in the political system in the
Right.
US, I would say, and there is an ability that the US government can, yeah, get access to our data, which is a really big problem also
Right.
because, yeah, I think you know.
Yeah. So, I mean, I do know that there's many times mandates for local data centers. So even if it is a cloud technology, right, that you have at least in region, right? We do that all over the world, organizations. But yeah, so politics is one of them, or at least maybe notions of trust. To your point, but your statement seemingly even before now, though, would you agree that maybe there was a lag even before, maybe even going back, 10 or 15 years, that it's, and I'll preface this. So I travel all over the world and meet people that run security programs, and it's awesome, right? And you're sort of
Mm.
giving them advice and looking at what they do. And there's certain areas of the world you go to, and it feels like they're 20 or 25 years behind, right? You're explaining certain things to them. I don't think of Germany that way, but I do sometimes their security program is often less formal. I never really noticed that their technology adoption was less, but sometimes I felt like, as an example, the size of their security team, maybe even the level of where their CISO reported, right? These kinds of things were very different. Whereas they were still using what I would consider mainstream technologies, but it sounds like that is maybe even changing some.
Yeah, it's changing. I would say the speed of transformation, really. So we're also on our way to use M365, and we've
Mhm.
implemented a lot of cloud technology right now, also for our products. This is something what we are doing, but I think we need more time to think about all eventual things which could happen, which
Yeah.
could lead to not sell to different kinds of customers, and this is slowing down things. Yeah.
So you mentioned something earlier that I think is very interesting, and it. Some people may take offense to it, but it's stop teaching things that you can Google. And I love this from a thinking standpoint, from a way that we teach, and even the way that we train security people. Right. So even it's a student problem, but it's really a knowledge issue. And there's this whole line of thought that I love, and this is what I'm probably most excited to talk about, is this notion of, stop teaching things that you can Google, but also I think that there's a big gap in how to find truth. So what is just basic critical thinking skills, I think, is also something that's not taught enough. Let's start with the stop teaching things you can Google, and then is there a connection to security programs? I mean, one is about teaching children, but I think there's an equal lesson to be told within security programs. So tell us more about your opinions on what we should be teaching.
Yeah, I'm a really big friend of the four C's, and for the most is critical thinking, I think, which is one of the most important skill we have to use in the future. Yeah, communication is another one, but I think there is a big transformation in communication in the future because as I'm looking at my kids, they're not communicating in the same way as I do directly from eye to eye. They're using more technology for communication. So critical thinking is something our kids, I would say, really need because it's right now it's a really big problem to see which information is right, which information is wrong. There's a lot argumentative, saying I am right, I am wrong, you're good, you're bad, to get the information who is right, who's wrong. Is this video AI or is this video real? Is this text AI or is it real? We don't know. And it's always, for me, it's hard to get the right information. I have to use a lot of technology. I have to use a lot of my knowledge to find what could be called as a truth.
Yeah.
So this is also what's a truth and what not. So yeah, this is things we have to train, and this is thing. Those are things we have to show them. I would say you can practice a lot of technically reverse engineering also in school to learn how AI is thinking, to learn the boundaries of AI and the capabilities of them.
So you're going into kind of the concerns or the guardrails of AI, and we're going to go there. But to be very transparent, I knew that critical thinking was one of the four C's. I just now had to search because and those listening may not know either. I know you know this because you're an educator first, but critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity are the four C's.
Yes.
I had to search for that, so I'm not that smart. I didn't have it memorized. I did know the Prussian educational model. That's something I studied based on a loss of basically a way to train better obedient people. I didn't have to Google that because I'd read about it before. But I think so. Do you think that your level of importance of those four things? I mean, I spent a lot of my time about how to build better security programs and have more relevant programs. I think if I see failures, we talk a lot about critical thinking. There's also a big need generally in communication, which generative AI helps with to some degree, but it can also make mistakes.
Yeah.
And I think creativity. is one of the most beautiful things that happens, uh, especially if you don't have enough budget. Maybe you don't have all the money you need. Is it forces you to be creative in the way you find problems, which I love back from my country life. Growing up on a farm, we didn't have a lot of money, so it forced you to kind of be creative, both in your play and your work. And I think that's one of the things that's very difficult to teach. But I think it's excellent to know as a child, and it's maybe even better to know as a professional. How do you teach creativity?
You can't teach creativity. This is something you have it or you don't have it,
Really?
but you can teach, you can change the environment around to make pupils more creative. For
Okay.
example, not teaching stupid things like vocabulary out of the book. Yeah, bring
Hmm.
them into an environment with a different language. I'm living 30 kilometers away from the French border and 50 kilometers away from the Swiss border. This is something which we are doing here. Yeah, we're driving to France and seeing kids in an environment of other languages, they find a way to communicate. They find a way to be creative, to fit in those new environments. I think this is something, creativity is, in my eyes, something which comes right out of one person.
Mm.
I can help persons to be creative. I can make artificial situations where they need to be creative and where they have to find their own solution. But this is only possible if you stop teaching really those stupid things. You have to know X, epsilon, Z or something and make situations where you can learn in.
So it's more applied than just from the book. It's the situation, not just reading from a book or not just the text.
And
Is
this is something I often see also in my security career right now. Yeah, we're doing a lot of training programs by clicking slides or programs, IT security, how you use your mobile phone, how work in mobile office. And I can say they're not really effective. Yeah, most of the users are just watching and sleeping.
yeah.
But if you change the way, and this is something I'm doing in the company right now and in the future, I want to create situations where we talk about how to react and try to implement trainings which involves the employees as bad or good cops, I would say. So if you're trying to make it more as a game and trying to involve the persons more, I think the learning effect is much higher.
You kind of went where I was going to go on the question because I find security awareness training,
Awful.
yeah, it's well-meaning, but it is, to me, it's just garbage. And some of it's the delivery, some of it is the content, but it also is making assumptions. Oftentimes, it's trying to teach me something that would never keep most people safe anyway. Now, some of it will, some of it's good ideas. But for example, one new example, and and I've looked at several leading providers of security education, but they're still giving sort of old advice on email hygiene, on how to find, like putting it on the human to detect a malicious email. And that's a good thing to be suspicious and to know how to submit, and to notify. And if you see something, to notify the security team. I'm all for that. But in some cases, you're asking a regular worker, an employee, to kind of be your detection device. And that's a little unfair, especially with the examples given in the training. So it's, you have, especially when things like generative AI are making these emails and the attacker infrastructure so clean, that it's almost impossible for a human to decipher. But we're still training on examples that were effective 10 years ago. So the training is not catching up with the behavior that you're seeing, that the most likely behavior or most likely problem to occur, we're not training for that, in my opinion.
Mm, yeah, I will a little bit contradict in your statement. Looking at numbers here in Germany, for example,
Hmm.
37%, as I remember right from a study, um, of the incidents could have been revoked if users would have uh, made the right decision. So for me, people are the biggest chance in cybersecurity, but
No question. Yeah.
we have to think about how to train them and which skills a worker really needs. Technique is a part of the answer, but there are a lot of things also in the companies where technique won't help. For example, looking at, I would say, the spy inside companies, for example, which will get worse in the future, I would say. Um, or if you have problems with a high changing rate of employees, which is
Hmm.
also possible in some kind of industries. Um, so my solution is, yeah, to make our training better and to think about which skill is needed in which position and what to train.
Yeah, I think if you have the chance to do this sort of role specific training, I think that's certainly a great way to make it more relevant. So it's not a one size for all curricula.
In Europe, I could say you don't have the chance. You have to do it because we have a new regulation called NIS2,
Yeah.
and this implements role-specific training by law.
Even specific to things like security and phishing training and these sorts of things.
Yes. You have to differ the content. There has to be a training for C-level. There has to be another training for IT guys. There has to be a training for the normal office employees. You must implement such kind of trainings here, yeah.
That's actually a really good thing to hear. So I was not aware of that. I'm familiar with the regulation, but I didn't
Mm.
realize it was role specific to the security training itself. So that's interesting. So what's an example? Like how would the training? I mean, for those that don't know, many of them will, but like how? What's an example of a different training? For example, for an executive, if you can, not to put you on the spot, but if you have an example, do you have an example? If you're an exec, and I just made that up, but if you're an
It's no
executive, what?
problem.
How's your training different?
I was a teacher. You can put me on the spot.
Yeah, no, I.
It's no problem. Um, yeah, for example, there are a lot of organizational inputs. CEOs have to decide about security and security strategies, and they have to have the skills to decide about those
Mhm.
contents. So the training must not just only make inputs in case of don't click on this link. There must be contents to understand IT technology. There must be content to, I would say, speak a little bit more IT nerd.
Mhm.
This is a differentiation. And also they have to get basic knowledge about ISO 27001 and programs like this. They have to know what an ISMS is. They have to know what business continuity management is. And this is something you can confront a lot of CEOs here in Germany and they don't can answer those questions.
Which I find, to me, that's really interesting that we've made it this far, and a CEO is going to know about go to market and finance and marketing and sales, and they're going to understand their actuaries, they're going to understand, you know, financial statements and all these things, but there are still these concepts that are still foreign to them.
Yeah.
Business continuity planning, BCPDR, all these things. So I think that's good. I mean, this goes well beyond, though. Like, what I still have a problem with is the awareness training that we have. I still think that it is boring and disconnected, but I completely agree with you that the vast majority of problems we have, the vehicle is the human. We see that. I mean, I see the human either making a mistake, the human either needing more training, the human either being deceived, or someone abusing the legitimate access of that human. So whether it's being compromised or some other way. So it could be insider threat, it could be just a mistake, right? And then it's sort of left to the security team to first identify the issue and then provide the correct response. And that takes a lot. You're training sometimes junior level security staff to identify, well, did this person mean harm? Did they just have an accident? Are they infected with, is there malware, or does someone have their credentials? And so from an education standpoint, to train a good security person, not only do they have to be technically good, but they have to really, back to that critical thinking, back to those 4 C's. And they also need, maybe add a 5th C. They need to be very conscientious of, what this person, they may not mean harm. They might be compromised, or they just might need training. It doesn't mean that if you see a bad thing from the person's laptop that they did it, or that they knew better, or that they're evil or bad, right? They just may be sort of connected. So, do you have related to the training of the security people? Do you have a comment on that in terms of making sure your staff isn't too aggressive or has that ability to kind of differentiate on intent when responding to a problem?
I would say here in Germany, we train a non-finger pointing society. In Germany, for example, in schools, I don't know when we stopped right now, but there is no situation where you are put in front of a class and have to deliver something. Those old school finger pointing is
Hmm.
something which we not use anymore. And this is something I can see also in our company. We're not finger pointing if something happens. We're very glad that someone is saying, "Oh, here's an issue. I don't know what this is. I don't know if the content of this email is right or wrong." Um, yeah, it has to be a positive fault culture implemented in the companies. But I would say the US is more an elbow culture than we here in Germany and Switzerland.
Yeah, so depending on the vertical that you're in, for example, if you're in the East Coast and you're in banking and there's
Yeah.
problems on the computer network, it's aggressive. So I worked in financial services earlier in my career in technology, and it is, if you cause an outage, you cause problem, it's aggressive. I mean, someone will come and take your laptop from you. You're done, gone. Like, doesn't, and it could be a mistake. It could be whatever. You're still employed, but there's no politeness with that. That's extreme, and I'm not saying that's the way it should be. But one of the things I still see, at least stateside, is making sure that your security analysts that work in the SOC are very careful in the way that they form opinions on what's happening and not insert some sort of bias into what they think is happening. So, working on facts and not attempting to jump to a conclusion as to what may have
Yeah.
happened. So, if you discover a behavior, we're looking at both malware alerts and security alerts and behavioral identifiers. And just because you see a problem, you might not immediately know what the issue is until it has a full investigation. And so that changes the way that you communicate. It changes the way that you escalate. It changes the way that you respond. And you want to make sure that you maintain being friendly. The reason why I bring all this up, as I've seen, again, some organizations that are very aggressive, or they've just never trained their staff that, and
Yeah.
most dangerously is they treat every incident the same. So everything, no matter what they see, used to would be re-image the laptop, reset the credentials, re-image laptop. It's like, well, hold on a minute. Like is that really what we need to do here, right? That used to be what I would see. So the training, it's both about not falling into an analytical trap, but it's also about being more mature, right? There's multiple response actions. Some might go to their manager for more training or human resources. They might need, hey, did this person not get onboarded correctly? Some might be malware, and we might need to reset credentials. We may need to, but it's if you only have one response action, that's a warning sign, I guess is my point.
I
And if you don't,
think
yeah,
one of the most important things an IT administrator or someone else needs is self-reflection right now. Yeah, you have always have to know this is something which you all also have to know as a teacher. What is observation? What is description? What is interpretation? You have to differ those three big things. Yeah, observation is really just only that what you can see in the moment right now without interpretation. We as a human, we have a big problem by interpreting without thinking about what you have seen. So, what I try to train and what I try to get to every employee is to differ between what was the observation, what, for example, has the PC done, what was the user doing. Please try to describe this in your own words and ask the user again if you got that right. And after you have this information, then you can start interpreting what happened and never ask about any guilt in the start of an incident. Yeah, it doesn't mind who's guilty. Yeah, you have to solve the problem and not to finger point. And I would say we're rather good at it because our schools try to get this to every kid here.
interesting. So you had observation, interpretation, and what was the third?
Description, but it's in the
Description.
middle. You have to observe, describe what you've observed, and then try to interpret it. What humans normally doing is observation and interpretation. They don't take the time for themselves to describe what they have seen. But if you try to do so, you are able, yeah, because you to decide about the situation and to think about the situation in another way. So the
One of the
scripting part, I
ways
would say, is the most important, yeah.
in for to make it connecting to a security analyst or to a systems administrator, the description might be, I would assume, utilizing collecting facts first without opinion, having sort of details to clearly explain what has happened. Uh, if you're putting this into the mind of a SOC analyst, what would you expect it to be? Would you expect this to be the description in the ticket, or the description in the case in the SOC? Like if you could copy
Yeah,
this from the schoolroom to the
no,
SOC.
it's more like someone is calling you or writing you an email. I have a problem. This
Mhm.
system is not working, and what's normally happening is, yeah, the analyst is saying, okay, yeah, I try. I think this is this and this, and you have to do that. And the problem is that the analyst isn't thinking about what he is hearing right now. Yeah, normally you have to take notes, you have to think about, and then you have to ask your customer in this case, did I get it right? This and this and this happened. This is what I got from you. And if you have this conversation, there could be a whole other situation and interpretation after that. And we have to train our staff to ask questions, to give feedback, and yeah, self-reflect what they are hearing and seeing right now.
So I think I understand it better myself now. One of the other tools, I think it's the same thing, would be if you explain something to me, I write it down, and then I say back to you, what I think I heard is
Yeah.
this. I believe you said this, and this is how I understand it. Is that correct? Am I? Are you? And and it's a great way to sort of confirm because we will make an analytic leap
Yeah.
because of who we are or our own background is different. Where I learned to do this is I spent a lot of years doing remote support. So you're just on
Yeah.
the telephone with someone. And these are before the days when we had good viewing. I couldn't see what was happening on the other system. So you're sort of having to talk them through certain things. And so that's where I had to learn that, where you would take notes. But no, I like that. So observation, description, interpretation.
This is something which also could help in a fight with your wife, for example. Not arguing back, just asking, yeah, did I get you right?
I think, yeah, no, yeah. I think this is what I heard. Is this what you meant? Um,
Another big pedagogic icebreaker for arguing with your wife is if you have a really big and hard fight, and that's what I'm doing as a CISO always is, and there's some really, really emotional guys, just look in their eyes and ask one question. What is your target? What do you want me to do right now?
mm,
And if you ask this question, he has to use the non-emotionally part of his brain, and he immediately stops. He stops yelling, he stops arguing, and then now he could sort his thoughts and give you an answer.
is it somewhat similar? And this is one of the things when you're in leadership, you're often in a situation where you play a lot of different roles, but one of which is you're almost to some degree a therapist of some kind. Not to say that I am a good one, but you're in a position where, and this I guess could relate into relationships too or friendships, is do you need me to do something or fix something, or do you need me just to listen?
Yes, this is also the same question.
Yeah, yeah. That's why that's why I think it was something close or the same. But yeah, what is the? It's a little more specific, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah,
But
the
maybe it has the
problem
same
with
outcome.
your sorry, the
No,
problem
yeah,
with
go ahead.
your question is that some persons could misunderstand them as oh, he won't get me right, oh, he's not interested in me. If you're asking directly after a target, what they want to reach or how you
Yeah,
can help, they will recognize, oh, he wants to help me, he wants to find a solution, he's taking my anger serious right now.
yeah, yeah. And I think that it could be not only I was thinking it less about anger, but more about emotion. So if someone is just maybe they're not as angry, but they're just maybe stressed out, or maybe they are emotional, like sad. Maybe sometimes it's like, well, can I help with like? Do you need to just discuss this and have a conversation? Or is there something do you want me to try to help fix something as well? And because I think sometimes people, and I see this happen with professionals often, they jump right into wanting to kind of change something in the moment and sort of giving advice before they listen. And so if you ask and then they say, I just want you to listen, which means don't make any changes, just listen. So it's kind of the same. It may be culturally a little different depending on, or where you are, but I think it's maybe on a similar path of, especially in relationships when you talk about, with your partner, uh, I sometimes my wife will say, I just want you to listen. I don't want you to try to fix anything. Right. So that's where some of that's from. So, So we've talked a lot about education, and we're almost at time here, but I feel like there's so much more that I haven't covered with you. Is there anything else you as an educator and as a security leader that you think we need to do better with in information security, that you see that education does really well, or your background as an educator, you see it very clearly, but the security community doesn't see it yet, or they don't do it well. So what do we still need to learn in information security? What are you still sort of thinking we need to improve on? Is there anything we didn't cover? Because the beauty of having somebody from a background like yours is you're going to see things that others do not. You're going to see things that a normal security person doesn't see. So what don't we see? What do we need to see more of that you see that we need to get better at?
I think one of the biggest improvements would be in the bigger companies, a cultural change. Yeah,
Mm.
you have to get back from or get back to a positive fault culture, that it's normal to make faults and that it's normal to excuse yourself, and that there is no, I would say, punishment after clicking on the bad link. Yeah, I'm working, I would say, in one of the best companies I've ever worked, and I like it very much because we are really, really familiar. We are a big
Familiar?
family
Yeah,
out of
yeah.
4,000 people. It's, yeah, and we have a real good culture. There's no finger pointing at all, and everybody wants to do the best. And if you make a mistake, nobody, also the CEO, would say you're an idiot, you're bad. You was just the people are always saying it's no problem. We try to find a solution. Next time it will be better. This is, I think, one of the the hardest changes you have to do in old-fashioned companies, because they are very strict down, top says, and there is a lot of finger pointing. I can tell from other companies, and this is something you could change, but you need years for it. This is not just finger slapping, like, for example, buy a new technology. This is really cultural change in companies.
One of the most, and I'll use the word disgusting things that I see, mainly, and it's in North America. Sometimes it's in other places around the world, not so much in Europe. And I think this is one of the dumbest things, but I see it fairly often, is people, I've seen executives brag about how many people they have penalized or even fired for failing things like phishing training. So you do phishing training, you do the tests, and you send the emails. And if they repeatedly click, one time it goes to the manager, two times it goes to human resources, three times, there are organizations that fire people for failing the phishing training. This, or they'll lose their. And this is not that common, but it's common enough for me to see it. And it is, what's worse than that, maybe even, or maybe just as bad, is of all the things the CISO has to report on, they include that's front and center for their ELT, SLT, and board level presentations, where how many people are failing this phishing training and how many people have been in trouble for this, how many people have been referred to human resources. And to me, training is important, education is important, but this punitive approach is you're not going to get any cooperation from folks. And people have told me about more interesting incidents. You won't have cooperation with the staff if you act this way, if they're afraid of you. If they're in fear, they will not help you. And so I wanted to share that because you may not know or may not see or whatever, but I'm telling you that is, when I see that, I was like, I would probably fire that CISO. I would not want to work with that individual. That's not a program that I think is a healthy one, but it's fairly common. So I share that with you just to get your perspective and I guess to make you aware of how silly some things have become, or at least to get your opinion on it.
No, I think, and this is also what I think the CEOs I know are thinking is that every employee has a value, every employee has a
Mhm.
big value for the company as long as they stay, as high as their value, and we can't afford to fire persons because of some silly mistakes or some dumb statistics. Yeah, we rely on those long working employees and everybody's doing mistakes. I'm doing mistakes every day, I would say. I try to get better every day. I try to reflect my decisions at the end of every work day. And I think this is the most human and best thing you can do. Try to do your best, but you can't avoid any mistakes. And I'm somebody, I talk about my mistakes, I'm laughing about my mistakes also with other employees, and I can say, oh, shit, this was really bad in that situation, but the show must go on. Yeah.
Yeah. It you're we don't have time to cover it, but I'll hit two more points. One, I think a very good leader admits mistakes, and also you see good leaders say things like "I don't know." If they refuse to say they don't know, I always hold them in contempt because that tells me they're likely just to invent something or make something up. Say I don't know, right? And that's a show of real strong confidence to say I'm not sure, or you know what, I made the mistake, or I am, we all need to. I think those are two very. I always look for the tell if I go in and meet a new organization, or if I'm traveling and say, like you're trying to figure out very quickly, like, okay, is this a good culture, a good company, a good security program, or maybe is there a bad? And a bad for me is, we highlight how many, the failures on the phishing training, right? Or how many people we fired. But I don't know. Is there anything else? Like I said, we're about out of time. There's so much more I could talk to you about. Anything else that you'd share on this topic? That before I go, I've got one more question for you. But anything else before we move on?
I think you can double the time for the session, then it's it's okay.
Well, we didn't even get to AI.
No.
We didn't even get to AI. The whole thing of guardrails around that. We may have to come back to that because that's a whole thing around truth and. But yeah, anything before maybe we have to come back together another time and talk about the AI thing because that I think is changing the way we teach our children and the way we run our security programs both.
Yeah, I would say if you're a new CEO, I think the most important advice I can give you also as a teacher is stay calm. Every situation is
Mm.
doable. You can lead every situation if you stay calm, if you observe, if you describe, and if you interpret. This is a really good help for your work, I would say.
No, that's fantastic. In fact, you may have answered the question even a little early. You're ahead of me, as always. But yeah, the final question, and maybe you've answered it, is pursuant to the name of our show, the new CISO. What does being a new CISO mean to you? And you may have just covered it with the observation, description, and interpretation. Anything you'd add to it?
No, just learn it. This is not something which is quite easy for humans. You have to sit down yourself. You have to make take your kids, take your wife, take your friends, and try to, yeah, improve this. This is not common for humans because humans observe and interpret, and to make these descriptions in the middle, you have to learn. And it could, yeah, it could use more than 2 weeks. Yeah.
The best advice I think that you gave, or a bit of some of my favorite, is staying calm, being able to understand how you are communicating and the words you are using, and even the speed at which you speak. So if you get angry in an important situation, all of that is going to change. So staying calm so you don't let emotions change your behavior or the behaviors of others. That I think is something that we could all work on, both inside and outside of our professional lives.
I can add my three questions in bad situation in classrooms. When do you have to act and when not to act? There are three different questions you could use. The first question is somebody dying? If
Okay.
nobody's dying, don't have to react immediately. Yeah. The second question is there some really big financial trouble if you don't react? If you can say no, yeah, then you have time. The third
Yeah.
question would be to say, will somebody be hurt or will somebody have financial big issues after not reacting? And if you can say no to all of those questions, you don't have to act immediately. You have time to
Mhm.
think about. And what I learned in different cases, or what I saw in different cybersecurity incidents, is if you are reacting too fast, you will make more mistakes, which will lead into very high costs at the end.
You are absolutely correct. I see people get into a hurry, especially in a breach situation, and they communicate very poorly. I could spend a half a day on this specifically. It's something that I'm very interested in, but they get in a rush and they communicate very very poorly, and they have to then re-communicate or restate their public information, and it becomes very sloppy and many mistakes. So I that's another topic, but I really like these 3 points. You've given us lots of good points of consideration. I appreciate you very much for being a part of this virtual mentorship within the security community. Manu, thank you so much.
It's no problem. Thank you for being here.
That's it for this episode of the new CISO. Thank you for listening. Check out more episodes on exabeam.com/podcast, and remember to rate, review, and subscribe to get brand new episodes first.